um, I was not permitted to have honor status because there was insistence that I must be treated the same as everyone else. Or worse, I think we could say, than anyone or everyone else. They had to overextend themselves to display that I was not treated too well. And on this basis, it took me 5 years to attain honor status. It was Warden Sachs that claimed to make the decision after I had been in prison 5 years. He said that he felt that I should be given an opportunity to be on honor status. So it was just before the 4th of July of the 5th year I was in prison.
1960.
1960 is correct. That I was transferred to the honor dormitory of the Ohio Penn. Now this meant that I would, and I was, given privileges to be out and around normal people. I could go out and help with transfers of material in the town of Columbus. I qualified for the baseball team of the honor dormitory and did so successfully. Within that year. Not that I'm a great baseball player, but they don't have very many good baseball players in the honor dormitory at Columbus. So I qualified as an outfielder, and this was a regular hardball, regular baseball, and I had never played anything but infield before in my life. I'd played first base, second base, and shortstop, but had never played a lot of baseball because I'd been a track man in high school and college. But anyway, I went out for the team so I could travel with the team to the other honor camps over the state. And I visited Hocking, I visited Marion, I visited, well, all the honor camps over the state. Let's see, Marietta, there's one. There are several over the state that I can't think of offhand. Let's see, there's some from London, there's some from other medium security institutions. The point is this, that there was ample opportunity to run away if anybody wanted to run. And I was there because it was known pretty well that I wouldn't even try to be foolish if I wanted to. So for 6 months I was there. I was then transferred to Marion.
What was the honor dorm like in comparison to where you were?
Well, it was very different. I was a first aid man, and I was permitted to eat when I wished or not. I could go out in the yard and work out with the weights, or shoot baskets with the basketball. I was given a wide range of things to do.
Were you working in the hospital at that time?
No, I was a first aid man for the honor dormitory.
You had, up until the time you were switched to the honor dorm, you were working in the hospital?
Yeah.
And they took that duty away?
Well, they, this was more or less, you see, the hospital is an inside penitentiary duty, and I couldn't stay as a member of the hospital group and still be an honor dorm member. In other words, I sort of took it away myself, to be honest, by accepting the honor dormitory assignment.
This is still on the same grounds as the penitentiary?
Yeah, but the honor dormitory is outside the wall. You're not walled in. And this is a big difference. I could walk out any time. There's a guard at the door, but I could say, well, I'm needed at such and such. I could make up something, some phony thing, and get out any time. The point is that the pressure was off here. On the other hand, there were many legitimate duties or needs where volunteers were needed. Transferring desks from some donor, some company that had donated used desks to the state, or some farmer that had an extra big potato crop and didn't want to commit this or admit this to the governmental tally, would donate these to the state. And this was not illegal. This was accepted on the farmer's part. I don't mean this was illegal in any way. It was merely something that if they had more than the potato crop that was supposed to be proper for their land, then give it to the pen or give it to the Salvation Army or some group of that sort. Otherwise, admit it and take the reduction in price. And as a result, we got a lot of potatoes and carrots and onions and things from local area farmers that just got a better crop than they figured.
Physically, what did the honor dorm look like, and how many men were there?
About 50. And, well, anyway, I would go out and help with these onion collections and desk transmissions and so forth. But physically, the honor dorm was an oblong building outside the main wall of the penitentiary on the front, or should I say south area of the pen, toward the east, with sort of flimsy wall between it and the outside, but only a gesture of a wall. And it used to be the hospital that supplied the penitentiary. And when men, I guess, developed the idea of going to the hospital to escape, then they had to build a hospital inside the heavy wall. So this became sort of in an evolutionary way, the honor dormitory. There are offices on the first floor, a big dining room, a kitchen, and on the left side there's a room with a collapsing door that is used as a, well, it's a door that, well, it's a window really that collapses toward the ceiling, like a roll-top desk might in reverse, that's used as a commissary. On the second floor and third floors are all rooms, and these rooms have no doors. They have only curtains, and the curtains are chosen by the men. Each room has 4 men, and they can choose their drapes, and they usually have material sent in from home for drapes for the windows and a curtain for the door. And there's no door, just a curtain hanging down, as we might see in an examining room or something. The men are permitted to have throw rugs, radios of any type, no television, except on the first floor, in one corner of the dining room, is a large, about 19-inch or 21-inch television. And in one room on the second floor is a large television set. And there are old donated seats from old, replaced. These seats have been replaced by newer seats in a theater, obviously. And the seats are placed in rows so that the men can view the television. And it's set up so that each room, or the room and the area downstairs, have different programs on it each time. So the men can then vote according to their wishes.
On the outside, when you're at the honor dorm, you could go stop at the store if you wanted when you're out picking up stuff.
Well, I could stop at the store from time to time if I was on a run delivering something, such as desks or bringing back onions or potatoes to the penitentiary from, say, a large farm. But this wasn't strictly legal. It wasn't illegal, but it wasn't legal. But the legal thing that was always reliable, I could go to the man, the convict, who ran the commissary, and tell him, look, I want some strawberries. If it was in the middle of winter or in the summer or whenever, if he could get whatever he could get, frozen if it was in the winter or in the summer if they were fresh, he would contact the man that went to the market for the dormitory. And I would give him money, and he would give the man money, who was also a convict, and there would be a separate purchase made in my behalf. And I used this mainly in regard to pizza. There was the cook there made terrific pizza, and for $5 he'd make 3 big pizzas that feed the whole dormitory. And he'd buy. I didn't care for the anchovy. I liked the mushroom pizza, and he'd buy mushrooms and tomato sauce and the whole bit. Downtown, strictly legal, through the man that went to the market. And of course he had lard and the other makings of the dough. And for $5 I could feed the whole dormitory, and of course I wasn't too worried about the whole dormitory. I was worried about number one. But I liked to make everybody happy, and if anybody wanted a piece of pizza, they had it. And about once a month I would do this, when and if I had the money available. And this guy really made good pizza. Of course, he was Italian, he had been brought up on this, and he really built it from the ground up. And he took his time, and hey, he had the time.
He wasn't going anywhere.
That's right.
Well, prior to moving into the Honor Dome, you were staying in the prison hospital room there.
Hospital dormitory.
Yeah. Was this was better then than the hospital dormitory, or was it?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yes. Much better. In many ways.
There you had about 50 guys in a room.
No. We had about 20 or 22 in the hospital dorm. 50 guys or better were in the regular 1E and 2E dormitories, where the usual clerks, assistant clerks, well, all clerical workers, Bertillon assistants and that sort of thing, personnel assistants worked. But in the hospital dormitory, we did have a few little extras, like a bedside table, and there was a porter there that would sweep up our ashes and make our beds for us. But at the honor dormitory, though we had to make our own beds, there were only 4 men to a room. And in my job, I was, as I say, first aid man, or actually doctor of the dormitory, and took care of all men who were ill in the dormitory, and decided whether they stayed or had to be sent inside to the inner prison to be cared for in a serious manner, surgically or medically. I was in the room all by myself, and I had a larger room than the average 4-man room otherwise. A little later, there was another man brought in who was helpful in the way of dental care, because there was also a dental chair and dental instruments. And I told him I wanted no part of the dental work. I perhaps could have handled it, but I didn't want to.
So you roomed with 3 other guys, but
no.
Oh, you had your own room?
I had my own room until I asked to have a man. Well, to be honest, I knew that there was a guy that was well versed in dental work that could come out if he was requested. So I more or less put on the story that I didn't care to handle dental problems, because I knew that if there was a dental man demanded, that he would be the next in line. And it worked out that way, and he came out.
So he was your roommate?
And he was my roommate. But the 2 of us had a room larger than the 4-man rooms of the average.
Which you at one time had yourself?
No. In the honor dorm, I was moved immediately in the dispensary. And I had it all to myself originally.
You slept there?
Yeah, I slept there. And I would take care of patients either through the window. There was a locked door there that I could lock or unlock. I could, in other words, I could refill a prescription, or I could permit the patient to come in and examine them. But this other fella needed a break, he really did. Plus the fact, what the hell, half the time I was in there chatting with another man anyway, who would come up from his room to my dispensary to just shoot the bull. And the guy was a solid person, and I felt that he deserved a break, and so I said, well, we need a dental technician, and they went along with it and brought him out, and it worked out that way, luckily. And he came out, and there was another bed right in the room for a second man. And he handled the dental work. And this was a convict who never finished the 5th grade, but he could handle immediate denture work. He would extract teeth and put in immediate dentures with, I never saw one that went bad. It's amazing, really.
That's why you waited until you got out to have your teeth worked out.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Exactly right. He was a nice guy, but god damn, I didn't want him working on my teeth.
He did a hell of a job. Oh, good. So anyway.
And the story of my life is that I would be his first failure, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, the operation was a success, but the patient died.
Yeah.
Well, how long were you in the honor dormitory?
About 6 months.
And then what happened?
Well, I was transferred to Marion Correctional Institution against my wishes.
Well, do you want to tell me what happened there?
Well, I was told by a man by the name of Patterson, who was on the board of, the board, the transfer board, I guess they call it, that I was on the list to be transferred. This was just before Christmas. So I went to everybody I knew to go to within the institution, and the surgeon-in-chief wrote a letter and delayed the transfer temporarily, and right after the first of the year, the transfer was effected, unknown to me or the surgeon-in-chief. And Mr. Patterson told me again about this, but I was transferred immediately. And when I got to Marion, I found out that it was upon the request of Dr. Hirschberger.
What was his first name?
You got me there. Dr. Hirschberger, and that's about all I can tell you. I forget his first name.
So,
I don't think I ever used it, but anyway, he needed help with his surgical situation there. He was told that he should go ahead with operation or quit. And he was a little too old to start reoperating. He never did operate much.
Okay.
He had been a general practitioner But the Marion Correctional Institution had been set up for complete surgery. And the surgery was well equipped, well developed. So Dr. Hirschberger was quite frank with me. And he told me that I need you here to help me with the surgery. What he meant was do the surgery, of course, which I was glad to do to keep my hand in. But he went on further to say that if I would be willing to do this, that he would help set up a school of nursing and help me get good time for teaching. Well, this meant a great deal to me, so I agreed very rapidly, of course.
I want to describe the Marion Correctional Institution a little bit. For complete freedom almost, that the honor dorm, you've got 2 walls.
Well, at the honor dormitory in Columbus, the wall was a gesture, and we were permitted entry and re-entry almost at will. It was an honor situation. Whereas at Marion, it was a medium security institution. There was a fence around it, guard towers, barbed wire, rules consistent with the inside of the penitentiary, and it was a come down.
That's why you didn't want to go there.
Right.
But when Dr. Hirschberger told you what he would do for you,
well, then it made sense to me, yeah.
Where did you stay there? I mean, what kind of a room? Did you have a room there? Or?
Well, I was in a dormitory at first, and after about 6 months, I was able to get a cell, and there a cell is an advantage because it's a private room, more or less.
Each guy has his own room?
Yeah, in a cell block.
How many guys were in the dormitory that you were in?
About 50. And about 40 in a cell block.
But you had your own room.
Right.
Or your own room. So you immediately started working in surgery then?
Yes.
You wanted to, what kind of operation did you do?
Well, you name it, and we did it. Anything that was needed. They had the equipment and the whole setup.
And did you do all the surgery there yourself, or did Dr. Hirschberger do?
Well, Dr. Hirschberger was there, usually at all times. A few times I worked at his request when he couldn't make it. But the record would read that he was there. He always covered that. Knowing my situation, knowing that both of us might be severely criticized if he didn't handle it that way.
Did the prison officials knew you were doing this?
Oh, I think surely they did, but they turned their head.
Well, they had a surgeon with for no money.
That's right. They were saving money.
Were there other people that came in from the outside, like at the Ohio Penitentiary specialists?
Not at Marion, no.
These are you just everything across the board.
Right.
So how long were you at Marion? When you were there until 63, January of 63.
Yeah. Until Ariane came. And it was about that time Dr. Hirschberger found that he couldn't carry on. He developed Meniere's syndrome, a problem whereby a person suddenly becomes dizzy and falls if they happen to be standing or relying upon their balance in any
They call
way.
it Bell's palsy too, is that similar?
No, Bell's palsy. Well, Bell's palsy sometimes is related, but not necessarily. But Meniere's syndrome is the one in which there's ringing in the ear, and suddenly there becomes a lack of balance, and they tend to fall.
That's the thing that John Glenn had, they said.
That's right. That's right. Which he probably had before he hit the door of the...
Which is why he hit it.
Right. Anyway, Dr. Hirschberger developed this problem, probably on a basis of arteriosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, as we say. He got to the point that he couldn't rely upon himself getting into the institution and out, and carrying on the facade of doing his own work. It became apparent to the guards and other convicts and so forth that he couldn't possibly be doing the surgery. And so the obvious was obvious.
It was more obvious.
Yeah, so he finally was, I think, asked to resign. Of course, this was based on the fact that they had a displaced person from Alsace-Lorraine who had been working in, I think, North or South Dakota for a couple of years, and had at least maintained himself to the point that he could stay in the country, and had had a good education medically. And he was ready to accept the job. In fact, had applied, which again showed that they were aware that Dr. Hirschberger couldn't last too long. The fact that they accepted applications for such a job. But anyway, I forget this other doctor's name, but he came right in as soon as Dr. Hirschberger resigned. And shortly thereafter, Ariane came on the scene, and as luck would have it, of course, the new doctor was very eager, effective, wanted to handle his own situation all the way, which was great with me, except that when I was not needed, I could be dispensed with at Marion. And when Ariane and I came to some personal agreement, and it became necessary for Ariane to make this public, then Koblenz could send me back to the penitentiary without jeopardizing the medical situation at Marion, because of the new surgeon-in-chief, who was doing a fine job, I must say, and probably still is. I don't know who's there now, but...
Did you have any problems there, like you did at the Ohio Penitentiary, with guys stealing drugs and that kind of thing?
Not in that particular way, but the chief problem there was with men who wanted to go through this nursing school and gold brick their way through. And I wouldn't permit it. And there were two particular men who tried to muscle their way through, and I wouldn't permit this. And I had to lower the boom on them and try them. And two of them approached me in the surgery one time, the surgical suite, one morning with knives on them. And luckily enough, this fellow that I referred to before by the name of Tex just happened on the scene because he had heard the murmurings, I guess, before. And he's a man who uses a knife anyway. And he walked into the surgery and he pulled a shiv off of his leg, which is of course a knife, and threw it down on the counter there. It's a stainless steel counter, which is the instrument room outside the surgery. And he said, "Well now, fellas, I haven't had a good knife fight for several months now, and you two are over there with knives, and here's Doc Sam here, he doesn't have a knife at all, and I'm ready to fight. And so Sam, and I think that Sam without a knife and me with a knife, and you two guys with knives, I think that's about an even fight." He said, "Now let's get it on."
These guys had their knives out?
Yeah, they had them.
They had them out in their hands?
They had them in their hands. Yeah. But they put them away mighty fast then. Because Tex is a guy that just soon be cut as not. And they knew it. And they knew that I was a square, as they call it, Square John, but I wasn't afraid. They knew I would go. They knew that I would try them. And probably Tex could have taken both of them without me lifting a hand, because this guy, Tex, has been in and out of knife scrapes all of his life.
These guys wanted to get into the school?
They wanted to screw me up, because I had eliminated them from the school. I had gone to no authority, but by pressure, by examination, by pointing up their deficiencies, I had gotten them to voluntarily quit the school within their limited mentality of stupid reaction. I got them mad enough to quit, is what I did. Rather than go tell on them, because I couldn't do this within my own feeling of right and wrong, but I would antagonize them to the point that they would get mad enough to quit. And then later they'd be mad. They hated the fact that they quit and would like to re-enter the school, but it was too late. Oh no, there's no re-entry.
You want to tell me a little bit about how you established the school?
It was just a matter. Dr. Hirschberger and I made an agreement. I'd do his surgery, he would back me up in the school. And we just set up the school according to the standards of the Ohio and other state practical nurse association schools.
What were some of the things you taught there?
Well, we taught everything in practical nursing. It's a hard thing to...
I have that little booklet you gave me. I think that describes it, doesn't it?
That describes it pretty well. But I used the Navy manual for Navy corpsmen, which is very extensive. I have it downstairs right now. As our project, we wrote the class, each class. The first class, I asked to write a book or a manual for practical nurses. How to give an enema, how to assist with an intravenous injection, how to assist on a surgical case, how to be a circulating nurse, how to scrub in, how to be a proper sterile nurse, all of these variations. Then the class that followed, I assigned them the revision of this, you see, how to improve this. And as the gift to the institution, the first class, upon my suggestion, but I didn't impose this, it was a unanimous thing. The class all signed cards and agreements to donate, or donation cards actually, to donate their eyes to the local eye bank if and when they should lose their lives in one way or another, so that the corneas of their eyes could be placed in the eye banks in the various areas, wherever the nearest hospital. And I signed the same thing. I still have the card, and it's still in effect. This was something that we felt would be an effective way of trying to demonstrate not only to the institution and the public, but to ourselves. This comes home when you talk about a person's eyes. It demonstrated to ourselves just how deeply we are involved. And if there was any man who didn't feel moved to take part to this extent, to donate his eyes upon his death to the good of humanity, and to perhaps give some person his eyesight back who might otherwise go blind, then by unanimous agreement, they weren't worth being nurses. They weren't worth giving the title profession, or they were just still plain old convicts that didn't deserve any sort of recognition on a professional level. Of course, this was what bothered the officials, I think, the professional connotation, because convicts are supposed to be dirty old slimy people that are just pushed around by...
Did they cut off the nursing school at all, or you just kept...
Well, it was cut off when I was transferred back to the penitentiary.
Right smack in the middle.
Yeah. Well, one group had been completed, of course, and the second group was well on its way. And I must say, for the doctor from Alsace-Lorraine, from reports I got, he did his very best to try to complete that second class. But from what I've learned since, it's been nada.
So you were there about 2 years at Marion?
2.5, I would say.
Let's see, you went there in January of 1961, and you went back in January of 1963, so it was 2 years.
I guess that's right.
The one thing about teaching at Marion, of course, was getting the good time.
Right.
4 months a year.
Right.
So when you got out, when you were ready for parole, how much good time had you accumulated?
About 5 months. Because I was earning good time back when I came back. I went to work in the school.
In the whole
regular school.
In the whole 9 years, you earned 5 months?
Well, I earned 4 months. 5 months. I don't recall exactly. You're right. It was more than that. It was close to a year. It was around 10 or 11 months. Because I earned about 5 months or 6 months at Marion. And then when I came back to the penitentiary, I went to work as a teacher in the regular school, and I earned about 3 months there.
So if you had been a teacher during all your 9 years, your 10 years, you'd have had plenty of good time. You could have gotten out
about 8 years or less, 7 some. If I had been given parole at that time.
Well, you would have been eligible after 7.
Eligible.
There's a big difference.
A lot of those guys get their time back, though. That's what do we say. I mean, you know, it's one thing to earn the good time, but if you get the time back, it's pretty discouraging. And there have been men that have gone to the parole board, amazing as it may seem, from the school, and they'll get from the parole board exactly what they've earned in good time. I'm told, well, now it's been in the newspapers that you're supposed to do 10 years before you get a parole, and we can't do anything short of that. So we'll give you, if a man, for instance, earns 3 years good time, and he goes up in 7 years, or 7 years and 2 months, or whatever it may be, they'll give him 3 years or 2 years and 10 months, saying that, well, now it's been publicized that you've got to go 10 years, and we can't, we don't want to contest with the newspapers and so forth and so forth. So we've got to give you 3 years, and when you do these 3 years, we'll turn you loose. And what kind of horse shit is that?
That's pretty grubby.
It's pretty goddamn bad.
It was when you were at Marion that Ariane started writing you, or was it the Ohio Pen?
Oh, at the Ohio Pen. She started writing me in well, again, I don't want to name the year, but it was a good 2 or 3 years before I left the pen, because I had Ariane's picture up on my door in the locker room in the surgery of the Ohio Pen. And I remember opening that door and having the guys come and look and say, boy, oh boy, my God. Whew. You know, they flap their fingers and say, what do you think you're doing now?
You also taught wrestling.
Well, that was just at Marion. I just had a little more experience than some of the other guys, that's all. I didn't teach much. I learned more than I taught. I had learned from some of the men at the penitentiary, and there were not too many guys at Marion that had too much experience, and I just well, I was a teacher, but I was not, by my own admission, I was no expert.
Was there anything else that happened at Marion that you want to cover in this thing?
Well, not too much, except these two guys that tried to attack me with knives, and that I was helped. That were thwarted by token of this man Tex, who interceded and helped me. Later tried to give me a bad time when I was being considered for commutation. And they, one made some very false accusations, and he also...
What were the accusations?
Well, he accused me of importing illegal medication into the institution.
Who was that, Jimmy?
Lawless.
Oh.
And he also threatened to kidnap young Sam.
All that because you threw him out of the class, right?
Well, but that was a part. I mean, that was the final act of build-up of... The guy had a IQ of 150, and he thought that he could outthink anyone and so forth. And he was very brilliant, but not very smart. I'll put it that way.
Very well put.
And he still claims that he'll kidnap young Sam when he gets a chance. He wasn't unable to do anything to me directly in prison or in the institution, Marion. So he knew that young Sam represented something whereby he could hurt me. So he and this other ass still claim that they'll kidnap young Sam and
Are they still
extract money. Well, one is still in, and one is on the verge of getting out, or maybe out about this time. One guy's name is Lawless, and the other's name's Foglio, Vince Foglio.
Yeah.
He's one of these little guys, little Napoleon people, you know.
You met them in the penitentiary?
Yes.
You didn't have any trouble there with them, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, and then they wanted to get in the nursing school, or they got in the nursing school.
Well, in the first place, Foglio was the think man on William Teller. Remember William Teller, the bank robber?
Oh, yeah.
8 or 10 or some years ago. Well, Foglio got caught, and he was the fink on that business. And he doesn't want anybody to know about it, but I happen to know because I was in the jail when it happened. And I got the word. Foglio told on William Teller. And not only William Teller, but the guy that got William Teller his getaway car, whose name is Frank Lazaro, incidentally. Frank Lazaro got the getaway car. All he did was take a joyride, but he dropped off the car at an ideal place. And the guy who knocked off the armory out here, who got the guns for the jobs that William Teller pulled in a short time. And let's see, what was his name? Well, you don't care about the names, but I know there was I know the guy who got the armory to get the guns, the machine guns and the shotguns and so forth. Vince Foglio tipped this whole thing off, and I know that he did, and he hates me because I know. Lawless is a guy who hates anybody who's any smarter than he is. And Lawless and Foglio fought In fact, they had a fist fight. And I'd take both of them on in a fist fight right now because neither one of them could knock themselves out of a wet paper bag on a wet Sunday. I mean, they're just both not physically strong. They're both weak, small guys. They're both about 5'2" or 3", and have the typical complex of small men. Again, the sort of Napoleonic reaction, yes. But the Lawless guy, and it's odd that his name is Lawless, convinced Foglio that I was trying to kill him. Well, if I wanted to kill somebody, I certainly wouldn't have much trouble doing it. But Foglio fell for it. They're both paranoid. And Foglio went for it temporarily, and then he got the idea that Lawless was against him, and he beat the hell out of Lawless, knocked 2 of his front teeth loose, and cut his lip, and cut his eye, and so forth. But later they got together and decided that I was a terrible guy, I guess, since I got out of prison, and they're still in prison. And they vowed that they would get me some way. And the best way they thought they could get me was to kidnap young Sam and either extract money or do something to him. And this bothers me a great deal, to say the least. Which, of course, is calculated. They're not stupid, these men. They know that perhaps the best way to hurt me is to hurt young Sam.
And well, how did they came to you in the Marion thing? They were in your nursing school at Marion?
Well, I'd known them before.
Yeah.
I knew Foglio since jail.
So,
that's when I made him on the teller thing.
Yeah. But then when they came to Marion, they got in your nursing school.
Yeah. And I had to get rid of both of them, and I did so by just giving them examinations and things that were too tough for them, that's all.
Is there anything else at Marion that you want to tell me about?
No, the main thing is that I hope I never see it again.
Is there anything else that you can remember that we haven't covered? You or Ariane?
I don't think of anything right now. Do you, Ariane?
You mean at Marion or just...
Anywhere.
Anywhere, anything.
Well, we'll probably find a lot of little things when we read proof.
Before I shut this machine off for a while?
I don't think of anything right now, except that...
Look at that cat. I'm sewing. She's sitting right up.
Yeah, well, that's the way she is. Except that it seemed to me that, well, in the first place, Ariane was not admitted as on my list of visitors, and I paid $30 cash to get that adjusted.
That's a good word.
It was legal. It was done legally and everything, but $30 made it.
Well, money talks in the
money talks. That's right.
Penitentiary.
And that's why the general idea is, I guess, I imagine this is why they don't permit money in a penitentiary, because money talks. And I had the money. It took me $60 to get the 30 cash, in the green stuff. But I had it, and I used it, and that's how Ariane got in to visit me. If it hadn't been for that, she'd have never got in.
How on this on this little business you went into, did you exchange any cash at that time, or
No, that was strictly legit. That was strictly transferal of funds within the accounts of the institution.
you never saw any money, real money?
No.
And if you wanted to buy something on the outside, they would take your money and...
Yeah, I would write a cash slip, for instance, to buy, for instance, if I wanted to buy Ariane a glass or a vase or something, I would order it and then write a cash slip, sign it, and that would be authorized, and a check would be made out and put with my letter and sent to the company. And then
I forgot something.
the vase or whatever would be sent directly to Ariane or to me, and then I could send it on.
What did you forget, Ariane?
What I forgot was to tell that when the news leaked out of my engagement with Sam, and after this hearing, when the pressure became so hard and so tough and so forth, Sam felt that the least he could do to help me is just get me officially engaged through Dr. Steve as who had the power of attorney. And so Dr. Steve picked out some engagement rings and went to Marion and let Sam pick out one for me. And so then we had a little engagement ceremony and a little quiet dinner, just the three of us, that same night. 1.5 or no, 2 1-carat diamonds in a gold setting. And I wore this ring for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, perhaps 4 weeks, but I just didn't feel right wearing this ring because of Sam's financial situation and all. I had jewelry of my own, and I didn't want anything expensive. And this ring in a value of money would have done a lot for Sam otherwise. And I just didn't feel right about it. And in the meantime, Dr. Steve gave me a few unvaluable belongings of Sam, old things, or a few old childhood rings were among these things. And so I found a little silver ring, just with an S engraved on it. And it was broken open underneath. So it was, and I asked Dr. Steve what that ring was, and he said that was Sam's childhood ring. And when he grew too big, they had to break open the ring, And I said to him, now that is what I would like as my engagement ring. And you can tell Sam, when you go next visit him, tell him that he can buy me the biggest diamond ring in the world when he can afford it and when he is out. But right now I have much more personal contact to this little silver ring that he has worn as a young boy than to that flashy ring that it doesn't mean anything to me. So Steve told Sam, and Sam didn't agree with it, but he said, well, if that's what she wants, then that's the way it's going to be. So the flashy ring was returned to the jeweler, and I wore that silver ring. I had it repaired. I took it to BT's downtown. They fixed it.
$8 million.
They sorted it together. And I brought them this. Did I tell you when I had my first meeting with young Sam? He came from Carver. I think it was spring vacation. Yes, must have been spring vacation. And my Sam had in the meantime smuggled out a little medallion, a little medal, on which is the Joan of Arc. And he said, I'm his Joan of Arc, and so he had engraved with a nail file, Sam loves Ariane. And he smuggled it out. He sent it to young Sam, and young Sam brought it. And even on the railroad station, I went there to meet him, And even on the railroad station, he got it out of his coat pocket, you know, and he said, "This is from Dad and me," because that's what his father had written to him. It said, "From both of us, as a token from both of us, give it to her." And so I went also with that to Beatty's, and there was a silver chain on it, so I had that, but it was for a neck, you know. So I had it made double, and I wore it as a bracelet. Such a cheap silver coin, you know. And I took that to Beatty's, and I told them, I want the engraver to follow the exact lines that had been scratched on into the nail. And I want the engraver to follow the exact... I still have that, of course, you know, if you want to see it. I thought I should tell you that. It was also so faithful, the way, you know, his dad had told him to give me that medal as a token of both of them, and he, right on the station, you know, before I got in the car, I have to give you something from Dad and me.
Well, I think we're finished.
Yeah, that's what you think.
Well, I mean, you know, for now, anyway.
I know.
Taping. Oh, boy.